Really nice to sort of be on the call today. Thanks for sort of joining. As Callum mentioned, we're going to talk you through how we go about kind of building sustainable kind of web experiences, and we're going to frame that and do that with a kind of client example. So we're going to talk you through kind of how we've specifically gone about that for one of our kind of major insurance clients. So hopefully that'll be kind of really useful. Just before we sort of get into the detail, I thought it would be good to do some intros and give you a very kind of brief introduction to Fresh Egg. So first of all, kind of who's on the call from the Fresh Egg team. My name's Dwight. Basically, my role at Fresh Egg, I've been here for about 7 years. I've got about 3 different hats at the moment. I look after all the agency, new business and sales, obviously that side of things, but also look after quite a lot of our technology partnerships. I'm going to talk about a few of those today, and I also look after agency marketing. I can probably safely say that I'll be the least technical person on this call from IO and Fresh Egg, and probably all of you guys that have kind of joined today. But my role today is very much kind of hosting it and facilitating the conversation with kind of Lee and Ash, so we can get all the information over to you guys about what we did. So yeah, nice to meet you all. Lee, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Lee Davies. I'm actually AI engineering director here at Fresh Egg. Although what we're talking about today doesn't really have much to do with AI, but the reason I was involved in this project was we were looking at a methodology for measuring the carbon impact and environmental impact of web builds. And in a previous life before this job and this role, I was the head of digital at the Green Party of England and Wales for a fair number of years, so it's a cause close to my heart, and I jumped at the chance to lead the internal effort here to be benchmarking our sustainability.
Cool.
Thanks, Lee. Ash?
Hi, I'm Ash. I head up the front end development team here at Fresh Egg. I've been at Fresh Egg for just over 12 years now. So I head up a team of in-house developers. We build high-performing, optimized web experiences.
Cool, thanks, Ash. Right, great. So as I say, as promised, we'll get into some specifics on sustainable web build shortly. But just before we do, and as Callum mentioned, it's a series of kind of webinars that we're doing with IO. So some of you might have checked out Fresh Egg, you might know who we are, but just before we get into it, very quick intro. So we are a UK-based website and optimization agency. We specialize in headless composable builds at the moment, our web build team. We were founded in 2000, so I think that excitingly means 2 things. One, we're quite old, but also we're kind of celebrating our 25-year anniversary this year. So not sure we've got what we've got planned yet, Ashley, but hopefully we've got something really good planned. Our agency, we're kind of made up of 65 sort of super talented people. We are based down in sunny Worthing. It's been blisteringly hot down here, not so much today, but that's just along outside the kind of Brighton, just along the south coast in the UK. And as Ash mentioned, what we're kind of really passionate about is generating growth for our clients. And we do that through data-driven, intelligent sort of digital web experiences. And kind of another kind of thing we're going to mention today or might come up is kind of the experimentation, and kind of that test and learn approach really sits at the heart of what we do. And that's kind of integral to kind of how we build and drive kind of growth for clients. We work with many, as you'd expect, kind of the world's leading technology brands, and we partner with Umbraco, Netlify, and A/B testing platform Web Trends Optimize. And the reason I put these on the slide is we're going to talk about these. These are the specific stack we were working with the insurer, so I thought I'd mention those. We also, as an agency, like passionately believe in sharing the value of our experience, and we deliver thousands of pounds worth of sort of free training each year, hence this course. And if there's anybody on the call today that works specifically in the not-for-profit sector, I'd encourage you to check out CharityWise. So CharityWise is our new online learning platform. It's something that we've developed ourselves in-house, and it's specifically aimed, it's free to use for all kind of UK and kind of Wales, Scottish, Northern Ireland charities. and it's a kind of online learning platform, loads of great kind of tools and training sessions specifically to help address the sort of growing digital skills gap in the not-for-profit sector. So, as I say, if you work in that sector, check it out, send it around your colleagues. It's a really kind of great resource. As I mentioned, kind of we're really proud to work with a range of charities and commercial organisations. Every agency's got a logo slide, but Ashley and the team, we've got kind of great experience across kind of property, real estate, insurance and banking. We're going to talk about today, education, retail and automotive are just some of the sectors we work in. And then the final kind of intro slide to Fresh Egg is kind of, I guess, what sets us apart and how we see that we kind of deliver great value for clients is that combination of kind of website optimization and kind of data all coming together to deliver that kind of long-term value. So these are our sort of core agency services outside of development, and we all kind of work as kind of an integrated team to deliver those solutions. And today, that kind of leads us on to what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about one of our most successful recent client partnerships with a insurance brand called Agria, who we actually started out, or Agria, never quite sure, Ash, you're going to correct me on this, but we started working with them around about 5 years ago in 2020. But I thought, Ash, perhaps a good place to start might be just to give a bit of background on Agria, because they're definitely an organisation that you may well have heard of, but also might not have, that you might well be using them almost unknowingly. So, Ashley, you okay to sort of kick us off there?
Yeah, excellent. Thanks.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So Agria, they are the world's first pet insurer. They've been providing pet healthcare, if you like, since 1890. They're one of the biggest pet insurance companies in the UK. They also have international presence, but what we're talking about today is specifically the UK arm. As Dwight mentioned, you might either be using them directly or maybe indirectly, because they also partner with a number of household names to deliver insurance services. Some to note are Lloyds Bank, Pets for Home, the Kennel Club. Yeah, they've got a really strong business there. When we first met them, they had a big monolithic legacy website. Was built on an old version of Umbraco. It was all coming to end of life. It was very slow in performance, had very poor user experience, and it really lacked a lot of the key features that people have come to expect from a insurance provider online. So,
Cool.
yeah, that's pretty much the intro.
And I guess this slide, Ash, gives us a bit of a, we're not expecting anybody to kind of read this or remember it, but it gives us a bit of an overview, doesn't it, of the kind of journey I guess we've been on with Agria over the last 5 years. But can you perhaps give us a bit of background on sort of how the kind of rebuild came about, really, and what the sort of key client objectives were for that?
So yeah, I won't talk through all of these points, labor on it too much, but basically the way we worked with Agria was that we actually started with an optimization program with them. So there was one of the key quote and buy journeys that they wanted to improve conversions on. So we set about building it ended up being quite a big test, or a series of tests, which evolved into a big test of their whole quote and buy journey. We got really good success with that. And that kind of led to us kind of doing a bit of ad hoc digital support with them. But then it came to them to launch a new product into the market, which was equine insurance. They weren't doing horse insurance before. So it was a good opportunity for us to take all those learnings from the quote and buy optimization project and put them into a new quote and buy journey. And we built them a completely separate journey away from their current or then current real estate. And it really gave us an opportunity to prove our technology stack with them and our approach to development. This was a really big success, and it came to the point where the whole project, the whole real estate, I guess, was up for tender, and then that's when we were appointed their new digital partner.
Yeah, that's quite a common journey for us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, sort of especially when we're dealing perhaps with larger organizations that have got kind of multiple development partners or big in-house development teams. It's that kind of first conversion piece where we can go in, kind of prove the value of what we're doing. But you could, frankly, kind of you guys build a bit of credibility in that business, isn't it? And then it sort of grows from there. So it's quite a familiar tale, isn't it, really, for how we start working with organizations.
Yeah, and on that note, we've got our first poll question, which actually addresses that point a little bit, asking when you guys plan your next website, what elements matter the most? Because here they started with optimization, which was the performance, then they understood the scalability, and then our relationship with them grew. So if we don't mind, people on the call just having a few seconds to fill this one out, it gives us valuable information.
While those results are coming in, I guess, yeah, without going into all the others that you can kind of see on here, it's basically led to us building over 30 new web journeys for Agria. So instead of having that big monolith, we have split out the different journeys that are required into 30 journeys, which include brochure, new brochureware, new quote and buy, new my account sections, and partner journeys. Right, cool. This is interesting.
Okay, so I think everyone can see the results. So yeah, performance number one, we get that an awful lot. But interestingly here, sustainability's come in second, which I suppose is a self-selecting audience because you've turned up for a webinar about sustainable web builds. But that's good to see that it is up there as
Yeah.
second highest.
I think it's fair to say, Lee, isn't it, Ash, when they briefed us, it was definitely, like you say, Lee, about performance. It was about kind of, very typical kind of like they wanted more of an audience-led approach. They wanted those journeys to be real built. It needed to be SEO friendly. And I think probably, 2 or 3 years ago, that was still the kind of main bit in briefs. But the more briefs we see now, it is kind of sustainability as a factor. But, in the list of priorities, when we started working with Agria on this project, where did sustainability rank, Cash? Would you say, was it quite low down the pecking order? Is it something we've took to them? How's it sort of?
No, they have they are a carbon neutral business, so sustainability was high up on their agenda. Obviously, performance, conversion, always going to driving revenue is always going to be up there, but they do have their internal policies on sustainability, so it was high up there, and they've got something that they call their carbon paw print, which is all about sustainability, even right down to your own individual pets carbon footprint. So yeah, it is right up there for them.
Great. And then, Ash, yeah, you sort of got into it a little bit there in terms of the approach, but is there anything else kind of with those objectives in mind that kind of influenced the approach? I think you said you would kind of now rebuilt over like 30 journeys, but kind of, yeah, it's a bit of maybe a high-end view of kind of that and the stack, maybe.
Yeah, so obviously they wanted to maximize what they could do with their CMS platform. They already had an Umbraco website, but powering the whole thing. But we knew that we could improve that, and we really doubled down on them having a really nice CMS experience at that point to power the brochureware side of the web. They want scalability was really important. Like I say, they've got those really strong growth targets that they're trying to meet, and they really wanted their website to be really ambitious to meet those growth targets, and the technology needed to align with those really. So the site needed to be built with users in mind, like you mentioned, right? But so we really took that audience-led approach with it, but it also needs to be really secure because they're in insurance, obviously, and they really want to see that speed factor, and which in turn obviously leads to like SEO performance, and all then package that all up together, hopefully leads to converting in sales. So yep, the CMS was powered by Umbraco. At the time, we landed on Gatsby as a technology choice. It's a technology we're really familiar with at Fresh Egg, but that gave us the ability to statically render out the brochureware website for that speed and performance, and also the same, obviously, across all the journeys, making sure that they were really secure. By choosing Gatsby, it just enabled us to leverage all their built-in performance optimizations, like image optimization and like load intent, so the site feels really fast. And then that also enabled us to deploy it to a global edge network, so we're not re-rendering the page every time the user requests it. It's just straight HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all just coming down the wire to the user, straight as close to the user as possible.
Great. And how do we go about kind of rolling that out, Ash? Was it kind of one big bang, or did we kind of like
It was actually a bit
say,
of a mixed approach with Agria. So we did do a big initial launch, which included the main quote and buy journeys. It included some of the brands that they partnered with, and it included the brochureware and some partner sites. So they have partnerships with breeders, and that allow breeders to offer like 5 weeks free insurance to their customers and stuff. So we did launch all that in one.
awesome? Anything in particular around about hosting, or how do we what do we go about from a hosting perspective?
Sorry, what was that?
Hosting, Ash, what do we do anything in particular on kind of the hosting side, or?
Yep, yeah. So we decided at the time that we were obviously Umbraco partners, and the best choice to host Umbraco was with Umbraco Cloud. That enabled us to not have to worry about things like scaling, security, minor patching. It's all kind of handled by them.
Cool. Wicked. Well, hopefully that gives everyone a good kind of background to kind of the project and the kind of tech stack. I guess getting into a bit more of the sustainability side, Lee, what would one of the objectives, as kind of Ash mentioned, was to achieve like a greener website with less carbon emissions. Did we manage to do it? Kind of what did we achieve?
Yeah, well, I think we've got a slide, haven't we, on that with the results?
Yeah, let's go. Well, first of all, yeah, should we get into a bit of
Yeah.
before the big reveal on the environmental stuff? Let's Ash, yeah, if you just wouldn't mind touching a bit on kind of,
Yeah,
I guess,
so
performance,
yeah,
the
just
main
to finish
objective.
off,
What
I
did we
guess,
achieve?
with the hosting, we also hosted the front end of the Gatsby stuff on Netlify. That enabled us to deploy to their global edge network, which gave us some of the green credentials. Led approach, choosing the right technology has had a really good benefit. So we saw a 29% increase year on year on sales. The mobile engagement rate up 25%. The start to quote conversion rate, which is kind of like an industry metric in the insurance world, it went up to 82%, which was considered the best in the market when they took that benchmark.
A happy client, Ash.
Very happy client. And the great thing is that these technology choices also had a really positive impact on the carbon emissions. As you can see here, we saw a reduction of 59%. So like a real good impact on their carbon reduction.
But basically, we wanted to assess, CO2 emissions is what we were looking at, associated with running a website, and really sort of prove how careful web design and choosing the right tech stack can really help reduce those emissions. But how do we go about doing that? Okay, we wanted to be quite rigorous because we wanted to embark on a project internally to come up with a methodology that we could use and apply on any website and all of our projects going forward. It's very important to us as an organisation, so we want to be able to benchmark what we're doing. So step one was we started looking around what other people have done, what methodologies are there out there already, and it became clear with a bit of research that there's a bit of a growing consensus around a methodology that's been adopted by this group called the Green Web Foundation. And I'll post a link to their site shortly, but it's the greenwebfoundation.org if you want more information. Basically, they've got a method for scoring web pages and estimating the carbon emissions associated with delivering those pages, basically based on the size of the payload being delivered, the hosting data center emissions profile, is it a green data center or not, and a few other factors like how far away it is. So basically, it's looking at the environmental and energy costs of delivering data over the wire, basically based on page weight, number of assets, number of bytes transmitted over the wire. So that's great for scoring web pages individually. But how do we apply it to a whole website? So naively, you can say, okay, we'll look at every web page on the site, run this JavaScript library, which will produce a number and give you a score for every page. But what do you do then? Just sum them all up, but some pages are visited more than others. We really wanted what we're measuring to reflect the real world emissions of the site's actual performance. So that means understanding which pages are served, how frequently, how many people. Look at things like if there's a page that's got a high carbon score but isn't served that frequently versus a page with a real low carbon score but it's hardly ever served, it's not as popular. How do you even out and average that out so you get a true reflection? On top of that, there's other complications, browser caching, for example, which really massively reduces the impact when you're revisiting a page or accessing multiple pages with common elements on them, same images carried over different pages, same CSS files, same JavaScript packages in your single session. So the Green Web Foundation's approach with the CO2 JS library doesn't account for a number of other factors like that. So we wanted to be quite a bit more rigorous. So to understand the real world performance and try and model it, we looked at Google Analytics data for the site to understand site traffic levels and the user actual real world behavior of the site. So to cut a long story short, I've got the methodology up here, 4 key stages. So first up is we crawl every single page on the website. We use Screaming Frog to do that because it's got a plugin that will calculate, that will run any JavaScript you like against the page. So it runs the CO2 JS library against every single URL. So we get a list of every URL in the site with a CO2 in grams, in milligrams of CO2 for each page. We then use Google Analytics and we look at representative periods, a month or a quarter, and we pull out the number of user sessions for every single URL. So has a session visited a URL? So every URL gets a number, the number of sessions that visited that URL in that time period. The reason why we take sessions rather than page views, because naively you'd think, well, every time a page has been served, so look at every page view multiplied by the CO2, is because of that caching that I was talking about earlier. We did some experimentation and caching reduces the amount of traffic over the wire on the site by way more than 90%. So in effect, by taking sessions, what we're saying is if a user in the same session revisits a page multiple times, we're only counting the CO2 impact of that page once because the revisits with browser caching with our Edge network basically made revisits in the same session negligible. So that's why we use sessions rather than number of sessions rather than pages. And of course, you can multiply those two numbers together and you and sum them. So you see, okay, every page that was served over that period, times it by the CO2 value for that page, sum them all up, and you get the total amount of CO2 emissions for serving that website for that period of time. And we took a quarter of the year for it. And then finally, we're like, okay, now we want to compare the old site to the new site. or we might want to compare two different sites. We want the methodology to be able to allow us to compare different sites with different traffic volumes, because of course with this site, the redesign wasn't just the only thing that happened. Their business grew, they did a load of PR around it, a load of advertising for the traffic view. So we need to make it agnostic to the amount of traffic. So traffic was up, one of those stats, we've got organic traffic, for example, up by 26%. So even if it was better performing on a CO2 level, the more traffic might have outweighed that. So we normalise it by basically dividing the total amount of CO2 served in that period by a number of sessions. So you get the average CO2 per session. And then you can do more apples to apples comparisons. So the old site, what was the average CO2 per session? The new site, what's the average CO2 per session? So the new site may well have a lot lower CO2 per session. Great news, high fives all round. But the site's being used way more, and therefore there's more sessions. So they're actually using more carbon than the old site because their business is growing. Actually, be able to compare it like that, the new site outperformed the old site by that 59% on the per session, but we're still at the point with their growth, even though user numbers are up massively, the total is still down on the CO2 emitted. So basically, that's our methodology, which we can then use to compare the same site in different periods of time, such as before a relaunch or redesign and after. We can use it to benchmark against other sites, maybe in the sector. So for the client, we can take that task on, benchmark them against other clients in the sector, and they can say how above or below the benchmark they are on their performance, and that gives them something to shout about as well.
I
Thanks, Lee.
think
That's really
one of
kind of
the
thorough.
oh, sorry, Dwight.
There you go, Ash.
I was just going to say that was one of the big learnings from this project, is we were really lucky to still have access to the legacy website up until and after the launch. And obviously we had all that historic GA data, but it is one thing to be really cognitive of if you're kind of considering doing these benchmarks, is to make sure you run those scans before you hit the big button to switch off the old site, so you can get those benchmarks.
It's a really good point, Ash, isn't it? Really. So I guess, like, if we're doing a site today, but when do we start kind of planning this kind of stuff with clients?
Yeah.
Lee, I guess it's a really good example as well, isn't it? Of like you and Ash's team, like you're at the analytics team here and the development team really working closely together on something to kind of deliver a solution as well. Just in terms of kind of ways of working.
Yeah.
We've got one question from Evan here on, do you have any running costs or any sort of idea around those costs?
Running costs in terms of the benchmarking, do we think, or running costs in terms of the hosting? Because in terms of the hosting, Agria actually saw a reduction in their hosting costs. They were on their old system having to load balance some pretty hefty servers to support the traffic levels, whereas the advantage of being on Netlify is that they can just deploy into their global CDN, and it means that it's just a lot cheaper to run, because we're not doing that constant processing all the time of every request. It's just CDN traffic, which is a lot cheaper on the bandwidth and processing costs. But in terms of the tooling, that's quite minimal, right? In terms of we have a license for Screaming Frog, and then the rest of it's just analyst time, really, isn't it?
Yeah, the actual benchmarking, an open source library that everyone's collaborating on, that CO2JS, and then the rest is just a bit of maths in Excel to get to the end numbers.
Lovely. And if anyone else has any questions, if you feel free to pop them in the chat and we can address them.
I guess kind of like while we wait for a few more to come in, Ash, was there any what's kind of been in terms of the way we took the new stack and the new development at Agria, has there been any kind of like upskilling we've needed to do there in terms of kind of training? Is the experience for their content teams trickier, or is it quicker?
Yeah, well,
user experience.
Yeah, good question. The only training was an initial session basically with their content team to show them how to use the new Umbraco setup. So they're already experienced in using Umbraco, but their legacy way of building out their pages was very restrictive. We moved to a component-driven architecture, so they had a lot more flexibility while still keeping within their design system. So it just required a little bit of training to get them up to speed with the workflows around and approval processes that we put in place for them and their needs and their business needs. But it was very minimal. After that, they're pretty self-sustainable in terms of content generation and stuff now. We spend a lot of our time heavily developing new features basically rather than supporting that.
And Lee, on your side, do you think this is something, this kind of obviously you talked us through a great kind of like bit of research and a sort of how you kind of go about the calculation. Do you imagine kind of clients would and brands would do this directly in-house and kind of measure the SEO? Would they need to rely on an agency to do it, or kind of?
Oh, yeah, I think everybody should include it as part of their brief when you're briefing out a new site to be designed. You have certainly make sure your agencies are very aware of it and what is their methodology. Do they have one? Have they thought about it? Are they measuring it?
Yeah.
It'd be great for us to take this research and start doing some benchmarks across different verticals. That'd be really good as well to try and lead with it. No, I think there's more and more consensus on the way this stuff is measured. Our methodology, we're feeding that back to the Green Web Foundation as well to move beyond measuring site pages into entire websites. So no, I think we've only just begun on this, of this way of measuring it. And elements of it are crude. Elements are the data center, but this headless architecture deploying static sites over a CDN just means less data over the wire, more caching, and that's the thing that has by far the biggest the biggest impact on the carbon emissions.
And I think we obviously a bit in and out, weren't we, on the Q&A, but I think that hopefully what came across to everyone on the call is I think the way we're building websites now and some of the technology choices making, the kind of the performance uplift and the kind of environmental impacts are very much kind of hand in hand, aren't they? They're not in isolation. So
yeah, they go together. If you design a very sustainable site and try and aim to minimize CO2, you'll end up with a very performant site that's very fast in the UX, because the thing that costs is data, and the thing that slows sites down is too much stuff being delivered over the wire. So yeah, they go very much hand in glove.
Perfect. I think we've got one more question, and might be Chris. Do you want to read it out?
Yes, we've got one from Ian. We've got, what led you to choose Netlify as opposed to AWS or Azure or Cloudflare?
Cool. Yeah, that's a really good question because obviously there's lots of providers out there. We do partner with Netlify, but the main reason for that is that it's kind of a one-stop solution for us. We know that we can get a site up and deployed on Netlify within 5 minutes. We don't have to build out the infrastructure each time or have lots of complicated pipelines in place. We need image optimization or a dedicated image CDN. We know it's available there. We know that they've gone through all the process of making sure that their CDN and their build pipelines are secure. They're all SOC 2 compliance. So in the insurance industry, that's obviously really important. So it's difficult to you've got to make that balance, right? That maybe if you went back down to the raw providers like AWS, you might get a cost saving, but the downside of that is you've got to put a lot more time into the process. So we just done the maths, and that's where we landed, really. And
they've been a great partner. The attention they give, the access to people that know what they're doing.
100%.
They just proved to be a really, really great partner.
It's great when you can just call them up and get some of their team members on a call and just chat through some of these decisions and making sure you're getting the most performance out of the site.
Yeah, we've co-hosted some webinars with their CTO. Try and get Amazon's CTO on a call with you, or to help you with some process or negotiate. So they've just been really good partners.
Cool. Nice. And then we've got another one around cache. So you mentioned edge cache and browser cache. What kind of cache rules / times have you set up? Comment around also always tricky to balance, find a nice caching setup that reduces extra server hits, but also doesn't serve stale content.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's something we've been looking at actually a lot more recently, especially as we move more into the world of personalization. So when you're statically rendering a site, is probably the most performant way. You can just get those raw HTML, pull it on the edge, and then not have to worry too much about the levels of caching, because we can put unique IDs and identifiers behind each of those, like the JavaScript and the CSS and stuff like that. And then on a new deploy, we can invalidate the cache on the edge as well for the HTML. But as we move more and more into a world of more dynamic websites, and we have to kind of slightly move away from there in certain aspects of it, we've been looking at other ways, like with other technologies like Astro, where we can make just parts of the page dynamic. But if we need a page to be fully dynamic, that's when our caching rules really come into it. But one thing that we've in a lot of had great success with is actually on Netlify. Another benefit is that they allow us to tag our cache, and then we can invalidate tags, and then that way we can have really long-lived cache. And then if we know that just a certain part of the website has been updated, we can invalidate the keys and the tags that go along with that, and then just invalidate the cache and reserve the latest content. So it's kind of there's not an easy solution to it. You've kind of got to take an approach of, do you need a time-based cache? Do you need, or can you control the cache via tagging? And then come up with the best solution for the individual sections of the site, I would say.
Quick response on that is that even for browser cache?
Yeah, it's obviously we can set rules as well for browser caching, so whether to make sure it always revalidates, or we've done stuff with stale wire revalidate, so that one person hits the page, in the background it's refreshing the content for the next user on the edge, and then it will validate the cache that way.
Nice. And then just returning to a bit about measuring the impact, do you measure the CO2 impact of backend and hosting?
Yeah, so the CO2 JS library, as part of that open source move, they basically have a list of data centers and the sustainable credentials of the data centers, where they run on green energy or not as well. So it will sniff, work out where it's been served from. The Netlify ones that we do are all classed as green data centers, so that does make a big difference. You know, your hosting provider, not just what you can do with the site with the hosting provider. And the other bit of that question was hosting, and was it something else?
Yeah, this back end. So
Yeah, the back end technologies. Yes.
Braco Cloud, actually, one of the features of using that is that it does give us CO2 data based on the back end processing as well.
Yeah, but you're right. An element that's missing that we've been looking at is, so doing the static builds, how frequently and when, and the compute power to do that. So that's nothing to do with the serving it as such across the network. So no, those things need to be factored in as well. But that's why we're very much on a journey with this, to try and make the best process we can.
And then another one's just come in around, please discuss the calculation compliance requirements have been met.
Calculation compliance. So I'm not sure what the compliance questions were. Like from the client, they had no specific methodologies or benchmarks that they needed to hit or know to meet compliance. They were just willing with us to look at what seems like a pragmatic way of measuring, the CO2 impact to their site at the moment. So unless you've got more specific information on compliance or standards, I don't think there's much we've got to address there.
I think that is one thing as well. Like obviously at the Green Web Foundation are trying to set some standards in play, but there is no industry standard on measurement at the moment, is there, or to get to compliance. But everyone just knows that, every business has got their targets to meet in reducing carbon impact, and hopefully this will just allow
There's
us
some way to it.
yeah.
I mean, me and the Sarah, who kind of heads up our commercial team here as well, been talking about, look, would we ever be comfortable putting this sort of thing in an SLA or in a contract? And I guess the answer is it just depends, doesn't it? Because we're going to be working with, you know, organisations on kind of every end of the scale, really. But I think it's definitely something we're open to. I think, as Ash mentioned and Lee, we kind of want to, you know, if it's not in a pitch brief and we're seeing it more, we will put it in every kind of like new website proposal that we put in as something that we feel passionate about and we want to measure. And we're kind of, I think you say in a couple of years' time, we could see it written into contracts as well, or, you know, as well as the performance SLA all around about sustainability as well. So
Yeah.
we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, and absolute transparency of our method for calculating it. So it's not just a big fat number on the slide saying 59%. It's like, which is why we're doing this webinar, which is why we do it with the client, run through the calculations with them. So complete transparency of what we're
I think
doing.
you're right, isn't it? Collaborating with them and being super clear from the start, rather than being a thing that an agency reels out as a ta-da moment. It's actually it needs to be a bit more client and kind of agency or developer and those teams kind of working together.
Exactly. If they had strong views on parts of the methodology, we would have worked with them to do this. As it was, they were very comfortable with how we were doing it as our initial approach to it. But I'm sure with different organisations and over time, as this evolves, hopefully our aim is for it to get more and more stringent.
But if anyone has got any extra questions, then feel free to drop them through to kind of Callum or Chris, and we'll field them and kind of help you as best we can. So yeah.